Welcome back to the One More K podcast. We are on episode number 44. Seems like a lucky number to me because 4 plus 4 makes 8. Very auspicious number in Asia. And as we all know, we are a bit Asian focused. Welcome back to the show. My name is Marcus, and we also have the backyard happy boy and Singapore legend by now, Ned Phillips, on the show. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Ned.
Marcus, good evening. Thank you for that. Yes, backyard is fun. I enjoyed it. And just to say, we are Asian focused, but also talk about business. Joao, if you don't know, 4 plus 4, you do know equals 8, and 8 means money in Asia. So this could be the show that brings you all the money for your business.
And indeed, we do have a special guest on the show, Joao Andrade, all the way today from Portugal. Good afternoon, Joao.
Hi, Marcus. Hi, Ned. And first of all, thank you very much for having me today. I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
We have a lot to dive into. I thought I'd give a quick introduction. You were the founder and the CEO, and now then non-executive director of the 100 Group, which we will cover quite a bit later, I'm sure. But also, I saw quite a few interesting things in your biography. You were co-founder and CEO of a health tech startup, indeed, an insurance firm, which was listed on the London Stock Exchange. So you become the first Portuguese to complete an IPO on the main market. So that is something we would love to find out more of. Well, you are acknowledged a best CEO in 2018 by the European Awards by CEO magazine. You have 3 children, and you have also quite a few dogs, a border collie, Aussie Shepherd, and a Shiba Inu. Busy family you have. 3 kids and 3 dogs. And a wife, I believe.
Yeah, and a wife.
We tried to get you on the podcast a few months ago, and we couldn't work out the timing because you had an incident in your life. And I think you are the perfect example for someone on the show who combines entrepreneurship and also trail running, because you have also had an impressive trail running career, done bad water and other things, and you have started companies, listed out companies, and also have learned a lot of lessons in your life. How did your last 3 months look like to start with?
Well, I actually had 2 incidents, almost one after the other. First, I was scouting for a race, doing a course recognition in Brazil, in a very special mountain range over there in the state of Minas Gerais, where basically we can say it's the capital of trail running in Brazil. Anything to do with mountain bikes and so on is over there. But I was bitten by mosquitoes, so I caught dengue, and that was, I think, early May, if I'm not mistaken. And I had quite a rough time with dengue. And then all of a sudden I snapped back and it just felt great again. So came back to running and working normally after maybe week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that. I thought I was completely recovered. And so that was early May. But then in June, we had actually a 100 race where we partnered with an Italian race called the Cro Trail. That's initially Craw Rides International, Cro-Magnon, was a race that started in 2001. So it's even previous to older than UTMB. And so we partnered with them to try and bring that race, again to the global stage in the Maritime Alps. So I thought I'm going to run the race actually to test it and then, improve the race, see what we can do for the race to come back to the global scene again in 2025. It was 11K, 600 meters on Saturday, and then 43K, 3,500 meters on Sunday. So not a very lengthy race. It was kind of good training, I was thinking, and also getting to know the race from the inside as a runner. So I had a good run on Saturday and felt good. On Sunday morning, my intuition told me I shouldn't go running. And I actually told that to everybody at breakfast. Just a very strange feeling, never happened to me before. But my intuition was saying, you shouldn't run today. And I actually spoke with my wife briefly and mentioned that to her. But I didn't listen to my intuition or my body. And I went to the race anyway. And on kilometer 3, I started feeling a very unusual heart rate. So my heart not beating as regular. And I was out of breath on the first 2-3K, which is very unusual as well. And I was not going very fast. I was actually staying behind. And so I called my business partner, which is now the CEO of 100. He was, acting as the crew to feel the race from the inside as well. And I called him and said, there's something wrong with my heart. I'm not sure what it is. But, races sometimes are like that. And maybe you snap back in a few minutes or a few miles. And he said, are you sure you don't want me to go and pick you up? I said, no, I think it's okay. I'll continue for a few minutes and I'll let you know. I'll text you or call you back. And the only thing I then remember is making a left turn to a single track. And then I have no memory. And my next memory is actually two runners, two athletes, just standing right next to me. My body is turned sideways. They're doing something with me. I'm trying to understand what's happening. And they're saying, don't worry, we're athletes, but we are both doctors. And I was not comprehending very well. So two athletes and their doctors, what's happening here? I'm on the floor. I must have fainted. I think I had a heart attack. Something happened. And, to cut the long story short now, I was perhaps one of the luckiest persons in the world. And for me, it's a bit of a divine intervention because the two runners that were just behind me, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, father and daughter, were both doctors, and I was assisted pretty much in real time. And that doesn't happen if you're around the house or training alone or anywhere. It was just incredible. Wow. So the message for me was pay attention to the way you're living your life to the extreme. You're giving a second chance now. We're here to help you, but make your decisions wisely. So after 2 months and a half of stepping back from work and putting my head into just thinking what changes I was going to make to my life, I'm now fully recovered. I did make some changes in the way that I'm managing my schedule in my career and just the approach to entrepreneurship and how to build 100 globally and so on. So that's the story, but I'm very good now.
I mean, you look very good. Anyone that can see you would confirm that. Intense. I'm glad you're better now for sure. And what a coincidence that two angels running behind you, basically, making sure that they were there at the right time. Because usually, if you're trail running, you're out in the mountains by yourself, and unlikely that's behind you are two doctors.
And maybe just to add, also it was very quick then for them to talk to the race marshals, which got the mountain rescue team, which is military mountain rescue in the Alps, that came very quickly to get me on a stretcher, maybe 1 kilometer down the mountain. Then I was helivac to the hospital nearby. So the whole thing was just superb. And I think that played a huge part in me recovering well and recovering quickly. And I forgot to say this was due to an arrhythmia that I found. I didn't know I had, and it was developed, and this is one proof of how the mind affects the physical body. It was developed due to high stress.
Wow.
My 88-year-old father has arrhythmia. He takes blood thinners called warfarin to keep him right. And the doctors told him, when he discovered it at his mid-80s, they said, you may have had this all your life.
There you go.
And you may just not have known. Yeah. So interestingly, it sometimes takes a pretty drastic action. And you're right. I mean, when we're going to talk about business, and you've had some amazing stuff from what you've done. But as you said, it was interesting. I think you said it just before recording. It was maybe the best thing that ever happened to you, which seems strange when it could have killed you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the best thing that happened to me. And I think two things have brought to light to me. And if we are talking business and entrepreneurship here, I think one sentence that resonates with me now is don't eat with people you wouldn't start with. That's the first one. The second one is apply to what happened to me. It's a Confucius quote, which is every man has two lives. And the second one starts the moment you realize you only have one. So it was actually the best thing because it produced the changes, or is now starting to produce the changes I needed to make to live a better life.
So I'm older. I don't think I get wiser, but you hear more wise things said just from the passage of time. And it's so true. Sometimes it takes really hard things to figure out that it wasn't that you were maybe going in, or you or all of us were doing some things in the wrong direction, but sometimes it takes just hard things to tell you, man, I got to do something different here. And maybe it brings us on to a good part. I mean, I must admit, I was sitting, I am a huge Dragon's Den fan, happily watching away, and the advert comes up and says, and this week we'll be talking about one of the fastest growing niche sports in the world, ultra running. And I leap out my sofa and I'm like, oh my God, I'm talking about ultra running. This is on Dragon's Den. This is insane. Blah, 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 blah. But before we get onto that, tell us the founding story of the company. Me and Marcus are both entrepreneurs. Marcus has set up companies. He's invested in them. I've started them and not finished them. Tell us the starting origin story.
Well, for that, I think I'll connect that to the rest of my background, which leads to the creation of 100. So in my previous incarnation, as I like to call it, I used to work in biotech, particularly in the stem cell industry. Initially, so always working for UK companies and helping to bring their services internationally. So mainly international business development. Then, of course, I got exposed to the investment world. And to be very honest with you, it's not very often that you see Portuguese entrepreneurs going to the UK, to the main Central Europe markets, or to the US, and raising capital and so on. It's more on an approach of not raising capital or making your own investment and trying to grow the business, have one partner. It's more that type of approach than perhaps the typical startup that we see in other places. So I was exposed to something which was not as usual in Portugal, when at a point, 3 companies ago, a company called Precious Cells International, based in the University of Brunel, when at a point we were growing quite substantially. They had closed a Series A round with a very, very good, reputable VC funds in the UK. I brought to the table an idea of building the first stem cell insurance policy in the world. And just to tell you very briefly, at the time, there were circa 3 million people worldwide that had paid an average of 2,500 euros or $3,000 to freeze their baby's umbilical cord blood stem cells, which are harvested immediately after birth for periods of up to 30 years, so that the family, the nuclear family circle, meaning siblings or parents or the baby itself, can use those stem cells in the future to treat mainly blood diseases and disorders, which is kind of similar to a bone marrow transplant, but you don't need to count on finding a matching donor because you already have probably histocompatibility with the baby in the family. So you had a problem where you had 3 million people. They already opted into these types of services. They paid $2,500 or $3,000. But the first families that had free stem cells were now starting to use them or wanting to use them. And the problem appeared. National healthcare services were not covering for these types of treatments, whether you're in Europe or anywhere in the world. Secondly, no private health insurance were covering at that point stem cell treatments as well. Third problem, most of the treatments, because of the level of innovation, you will have to travel abroad to receive treatment. You wouldn't have access to the treatments for 82 diseases at the time. So you'll have to travel, which implies another problem. How do you share medical records? How do you engage with the medical teams? Where are the hospitals? How do you transport a patient with cancer to receive treatment? Well, with that, I had an idea to build a first stem cell insurance policy covering for the whole treatment, accommodation, travel, building kind of a full insurance plan. We found 2 major insurers that backed it. And so I started my previous company called White Cells Group, which eventually, because of that, caught a lot of the attention on the investment market because the opportunity was there. It was an annual recurring revenue model. If someone is paying £150 to access treatment, they'll probably renew the policy for the next 30 years, the same period they have the stem cells frozen. So very low incidence rates, very good product for insurance companies. And then we started building labs and providing all the services, doing stem cell research, building educational programs for midwives and for obstetricians so they could recommend these services to their patients. And that led us to drive the company to an IPO on the main market of the London Stock Exchange. That was July 2016. And so that was kind of 10, 11 years of very hard work. And I bought into the whole chisel of work very hard and you're going to make it. So if friends would call me, I would take the advice from Les Brown and say, call me back in 4 or 5 years. Once I've made it, I cannot have a beer now. And that's what I was going to tell my friends or my family. I'm not ashamed to say it now. I don't recognize myself in that person, but that's who I was at the time. And so by the end of 2016, you didn't need to be a genius or to predict the future to figure out that I was putting myself in opening a door at the bottom of the well to go further deep down. And so by the end of that year, working 80 to 100, sometimes more hour weeks, I did over 200 flights in 2016. I found I was not being productive. I was completely isolated. My very few time was my wife and children. I thought I'm completely disconnected from the world. All I know is work and solve problems inside the company. I don't do anything else anymore. And so that led to kind of start major depression. And I said, I need to do something completely different to bring some meaning, purpose, and in fact, balance to my life and start engaging with people again. And so that's when running came along. I went, this is the typical story before Christmas. I went into Google and searched toughest endurance races in the world. I didn't know what an ultra marathon was. A list came up. Badwater 135 was at the top. So I quickly went into YouTube and pressed Badwater 135. A video came up. These people getting halivaced and or vomiting and so on, trying to cross that valley. And I immediately told my wife, I think I found the solution for everything. I'm going to run this race in 3 years. And that's where my journey started. I started training. I started thinking, what are the races I need to do? Who should I look up to? What do I need to eat? All those initial things as a new athlete in the sport. And for 3 years, I was starting to run ultra races. In the first year, at the end of the first year, I ran a 200-mile race, which is not something that I would recommend again to anyone. But that's how I approached everything. It took me quite a while to figure out that that was not the way to. And effectively from there, what happened was I was thinking, okay, who is the best athlete in the world, female and male? What are the largest races? Is there any competition where you actually have to qualify to be there at a final and have the best athletes in the world competing, like a true global stage that people want to be? And then I was seeing very local associations in different mountain ranges with races with 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people. The Nike Trail, Adidas Terrex, and all these brands already looking into the sport. I was looking at things like the Ultra Trail World Tour at the time, the UTMB, and other race series appearing, but I wasn't seeing anything fully dedicated to the endurance distances, like the Ironman for triathlon. And so my idea was, when I exited my previous company at the end of 2018, was to start a world series focused on the 100-mile, the 200-mile, and the 100K distance, primarily the endurance ones, and finding the most amazing mountain ranges worldwide, but places where we can have very good government support to have a good experience for everybody, and start to get, the endurance athletes on the global stage, try and get it televised, get the big brands out there, and just try and help elevate the sport and in a way create a platform for athletes to become professional and live from the sport. So that was triggered the start of 100 in 2019.
Wow, what a story. From one extreme to the other extreme, if I may say so. Yeah. I have a feeling there is a intensity inside you that from listing a company, working 100 hours a week to now running 100 hours a week or something like that. But which maybe now you have come to realize something you have to change. It sounds like it. But I hear you. I'm very similar. When I was doing my Singapore investment time, I also started to, was of crazy hours. And then what's next? Ultra running is next. And I came around, luckily without a big incident, to realize I have to change a few things too. But so on the founding story of 100 Group, one thing stands out is usually when we talk with many race organizers and race owners from, UTMB and others on the show, it's a very organic bottom-up approach to start something small in a village and then start to grow the series, whether it's UTMB or others. Yours seem to be more like a big vision, top-down approach to say, hey, let's build a global series from the get-go. How did you feel about that difference to other races, and how did it then develop from there onwards?
Well, you just need hit the nail on the head there, because that also brought us to the biggest hurdles we had to overcome because of that, exactly because of that approach. Because I was coming from a more pharmaceutical, healthcare background, the insurance world. You have things very well developed from a professional standpoint with, standard operational procedures, project management systems, CRM, having a good corporate structure, corporate governance, and all that kind of stuff, to then wanting to build a world, which eventually turned into a world championship, where we would have to connect races in different places in the world, from the Himalayas in India to Minas Gerais in Brazil, or to Italy or the US or Indonesia, different places in the world, having to connect with local organizers, trying to bring them on to a global stage, not necessarily focusing on attracting the already very well-established races, but in a lot of cases trying to build new events from the ground up, to try and follow an approach which we think could be the best one for the sports, for the athletes and teams on the long run. But from an idea and a big vision to actually having the buy-in from local organizers to follow procedures, to try and implement certain rules, and combine that with the organic approach to the community, and having very good engagement, taking very well care of everybody, and putting heart and soul into organizing the races. Combining these two things in the first year was very hard. That was 2022. We obviously had COVID until pretty much mid 2022. So we started 2019, but actually only started trading kind of 24 months ago in July 2022. And so I think the first 2 years, 2022 and 23, and maybe even 2024 until maybe May, we tested a lot of different models until the last 3-4 months, where we actually, as we like to say, we cracked the model, we believe. And what we're going to bring in 2025 is a solution to the problems we found during this period, which is basically a combination of races we fully own and operate, to a new series where we have already well-established races participating in the World Championship as well, and integrating them in a different perspective to what I may say competitors have a true franchise model in place already, which is not the path we want to follow.
And so it's great to hear the stories. One thing is that we know race directing is really hard to make money. The reason we know, we've had race directors on and they tell us it's really hard to make money. Even UTMB told us they only started making money pretty recently. So, I mean, all entrepreneurship is hard, but did you realize when you went into this, because you came in, you're an entrepreneur, you know the deal, you ran races, you figured it. Was there a bit of naivety to think, oh, I'm an entrepreneur and I run races, let's go? You know what I'm trying to ask, because this stuff's hard.
And that's a very, very fair question. To be very honest, first of all, when we started in 2019, I thought I just exited my business. I have so many contacts in the investment world. The opportunity is so big, but it's something on the long term. I'm sure we'll have people backing us until we turn profit in maybe 6-7 years' time. I never thought this was going to be a quick win. But in always promoting it as something that once the brand is very well established, then it will be harder to bring it down once we kind of ring fence a part of the trail running industry, the endurance side, inside a very well organized and promoted world championship for everybody. Now, two things we didn't predict or prepare for. One was the pandemic, for obvious reasons. That's for everybody, and events. It's just, well, what can you do, right? That was the first one. But the pandemic led to a big change in the world, in the world of VC funding, angel investment, private equity, anything to do with investments in startups. And we've seen the decline 2022, 40% drop in global venture capital funding and all of that. And so tapping into the investment markets was 100 times harder than I thought. Whilst before maybe 7 meetings to a yes, maybe nowadays it's 100 meetings to a yes. Not everybody will put up with it anymore. And in a way, we can say there's a bit of naivety or ignorance into approaching a new industry, but at the same time, that's when sometimes people coming from the outside break the mold because they bring something new.
I love that thought because you're right. I was in banking and somebody said to me, why would you hire a banking to fix banking? Banking sucks. You would never hire a banker to fix banking because they made it really badly. It wasn't that races were badly done. There were a lot of great races around, but it is that reality of making money from it. I mean, as I said on the intro, huge Dragon's Den fan, you said it took 100 meetings to get a yes. How can I, and this is me just being a fanboy of Dragon's Den, what was that procedure like, A, to get on, and B, once you were on, I would love to hear how it felt for you.
Well, we were on Dragon's Den because previous to that, we had a Crowdcube raise, which is one of the largest crowdfunding platforms, UK, Europe, and probably one of the largest in the world. I'm not 100% sure, but it's quite a big one. So we had 110 or 120 investors with small tickets coming in. So we raised 200 something thousand pounds in that Crowdcube raise. And that was November 2022. And what that did was it gave us a lot of exposure into the investment market because, to be honest, no one had looked into trail running pretty much, which is an issue because there's no benchmarks. So they cannot compare to anything out there. And they've never heard of UTMB. If trail runners think that people outside this world know what it is, most of them think it's a hospital group in the US or something, which has a very big turnover and they think it's something really big, but you have to double check which UTMB you're looking at. That led to actually the BBC reaching out to me, asking if we were interested because we had quite a good exposure. I figured out very quickly the same that perhaps everyone trying to jump into this sport and build, whether it's apparel, running shoes, nutrition, or race organizing or something, is the size of the community, how it's growing, and the exodus of road runners into trail running, which means the sport has huge potential for growth. And they thought, here are these guys, which are kind of experienced entrepreneurs tapping into this world. Maybe this can be a completely different episode and tapping into my kind of story of suffering in a way, which leads up to building the company. So that's what they thought could make a good episode, perhaps. And so we went through a very bureaucratic process to get the due diligence was quite heavier than I actually thought. And you never know if you're going to actually make it to the recording day. You only know very, very close to the date, and it can be canceled there on the spot. But they make you very aware of everything. So you only pursue that route if it's something you really want to do. And we recorded in May 2023, and it was released in April 2024. So what you've seen was recorded a year before, almost, or 11 months before. And the process was, I actually was very excited at the point that the doors open on the lift to go and pitch to the Dragons. But I was expecting, and this says a lot about expectations, I was thinking about this huge studio, very fancy and so on, as it seems on the cameras, but it was actually the opposite of that. Very slim chairs, and just they were very close to me. They looked to be far from when I see the show, but they were just right there, just in front of me. It looked more like we are having a conversation at someone's living room rather than recording a TV show, and it made just everything much easier. And I think it's much harder to pitch to certain VCs and private equities in I've been to Fidelity and Rothschilds and that kinds of places before. They are more, they ask very different questions in a different way than I think Dragon's Den. So I think that prepared me very well for that show, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you definitely came across as a guy who knew what was going on in there because, you watch a lot of Dragon's Den and For anybody who's listening to this in America, it's Shark Tank before Shark Tank was Shark Tank. It's the OG. And I just got the sense, like listening to you, I'm like, this dude's done VC pitching before. He knows the deal. Sure, to say it as it is, your business and entrepreneur experience, VC experience, is longer and deeper than your running experience. And I would say, and particularly when you pushed back on Stephen and you gave a bit of a hustle back. I mean, it was funny because I was sitting there, and I'll be honest, I remember I was screaming at the TV screen because I'm easily excitable. I was my wife. I'm like, hold on, he hasn't been running forever. What the hell? What's going on? I'm like, oh my God, look, I think he's going to get Stephen. Then Stephen had said, oh, I do some bike riding. And, there is this zeitgeist of ultra at the moment, whether it was because of lockdown and everything, you were the right guy at the right time in the right place. How was it? Did you have to keep quiet for 11 months and not tell anybody before it was shown?
You cannot tell anybody. It's a process where you have to keep it completely confidential, because if there's any leak of what's going to happen, then the show doesn't air and nothing happens. So you go through all that process. You might as well just keep it confidential and prepare everything for the time that display to the world.
Makes sense. And how? So maybe to jump off Dragon's Den, because before we ask about how is Stephen as an investor, how is business today? How are things going?
Well, now I was saying that the last 3 or 4 months, we made some changes in the model. Is we actually decided, which is very hard to do in business, which is to take a step back. And in a way, it's related to my health issue as well, because that got the whole board and the management team to step back for a little bit and look into the bigger picture again, and make very good inquiries about which direction we wanted to go to fulfill our mission. And so we redesigned the concept of the World Championship, which we will be launching just before Christmas. But I can say for now, because of course some things only when it's released, but the World Championship will be composed of 2 series next year. And this is to answer your question of how is business, where we will have what we call the Premier Series with 6 races, which are owned and fully operated by the 100 team. And these are very specific locations we chose worldwide to have very good global stages for the sport, and to have direct relation with the local governments, tourism development agencies, the sponsors, the local community, and everything. But on the other side, we will be launching the Alliance Series, which are affiliate races, which can apply to be part of the World Championship, and always talking about the categories of 100K, 100 mile, and the 200 mile, particularly the 100 mile and the 200 mile distance, where we putting most of our emphasis. And so we have quite a lot of races already signed up for 2025. And the only real big differences for the athlete when competing on the Alliance Series or the Premier Series is we have our own ranking for the World Championship, which will be adjusted for 2025. The Premier Series races counts a little bit more points than the affiliate races. And the final of the World Championship will be a Premier race at the end of November next year. And there's 2 things that will happen in the championship. One is you have the individuals and team rankings. So you'll have any athletes like Salomon or North Face or whichever team they are part of, they will be counting points for their team as well, not just individually. Then the second thing is you have the rankings, but you also have the qualifying for the final, so which is performance-based. And so athletes on the 2 races where they have their best results, that will equal a certain number of points, and the highest ranking athletes will qualify for the final. And we will have a box at the start. We call it the golden box, where the most fast athletes will be at the start, a little bit ahead of everybody else in the final. And that's kind of the genesis of what we're going to be bringing in 2025. So how is business now? We are now at a stage where we sign up so many races, and there's so much appetite for so many races to join the affiliate series. And we figured out with certain governments how to actually put together larger scale events with more media visibility as well, with national TV channels to then try and distribute them internationally. That's, I think the business now is at a point that it's an inflection point. And if we have a good 2025, I think the world will open up for 100, and it will be the best thing that happens for any trail running athlete that likes the big distances from the 100K onwards. But 2025 will be the proof of the pudding, really.
Nice. Big step for you. Exciting to see the news then in December. Maybe a typical investor question, but coming from a good point in my heart, then how do you measure success for next year? Because it seems like the next year is going to be an important year for you.
Yeah.
So what do you need to see at the end of next year in order to continue for 2026? Or like, how do you measure a great year next year, basically?
I think the most important point, besides any financial aspects, is us onboarding these affiliate races at the same time that we're hosting our Premier Series races in a way that is not confusing, that flows very well, and that the athlete feels he's participating in something where he experiences a different culture, a different mountain, because he's running in, let's say, Brazil. But there's a kind of similar quality experience if he's then running in the UAE, for example, in our race. So I think the execution of this plan of having affiliate races and our own races, jumping to 14, 15 races next year and executing them well, I think that's the biggest measure of success. And we will have a tool to inquire all the athletes, and we'll make them fully visible to everybody that is following our races, if they like the experience, the race or not. And this will be full transparency in 2025.
So a question. So I started trail running 30 years ago. There was nobody doing it, not nobody, but, Gordy Ainsley, because his horse couldn't run, went across in Western states. But today, it's still niche, but it's popular. A question around where we are today. Killian, Courtney, Zach Miller. Is your goal to get these people to your races, or are you trying to find new superstars?
I think 2025, we want to do a good job with delivering the races, not particularly having all the or most of the top athletes competing in the 100 World Championship. And the main reason I say that is often, and I certainly have paid the price for that before, you have to be very good operationally on a global venture, particularly when it's a World Championship, delivering what you're promising before getting all the top players, in this case, the top athletes and teams and everybody competing. If we have a few of them, which we have confirmed a few, it's great for feedback and, in a way, ambassadorship and giving feedback on, the ranking methodology we are following, or how to qualify for the final, or course design guidelines, and so on and so forth, before we actually go very bold and have everybody there. That's more of a 2027 kind of plan. And I don't think we are going to be rushing any of that. And if we do a good job, 100% certain it will be them wanting to race with us, and the teams, which are in some cases sponsors as well, wanting to have their teams and their athletes competing in the 100 World Championship. So in that respect, it's more dynamic and organic than it is something we are going to be trying to put a portion of our funding into having all those people here. 2025 is about execution to the level we want the World Championship to be, which is basically starting to break the bubble of the trail running world and starting to get people from outside the trail running world to watch the sport.
I once saw this great quote. You remember Wii? The Nintendo placed the game thing, when they brought out Wii. When the CEO of Nintendo, it's something you just said there that made me think of this. When the CEO of Nintendo said, "How are you going to get gamers to play Wii?" He said, "I'm not. I'm going to get people who've never played games to play Wii." Yeah. And what you're saying is you're not just trying to convert existing trail runners. You're bringing in road runners, other people. That does make sense, because let's face it, the calendar is crowded now. I can go and select a gazillion different races. And if I know UTMB or if I know Western States, I want to go there because it's more prestigious. But for
Yeah.
people coming in, and I say this with all respect, whether it's yours 100 or well, maybe not UTMB, but another race,
Yeah.
if your execution is better, you don't have to worry about that depth of history and brand.
Yeah. And look, we're talking about UTMB here. It's just the obvious one where the flow of the conversation goes. But let's actually look at Ironman, their partner. Ironman wasn't built in a day, or Spartan, or any of these kind of global brands in the endurance world. Either you are a true endurance player, and as I said in Dragon's Den, and sorry for the ultra runners listening, I do think entrepreneurship is harder than running a 200 race. So, and this, no disrespect to anybody, but it's exactly how I feel, because it seems long, a 200-mile race, but you finish it in 50 or 60 hours, and then you're recovering. Entrepreneurship never ends. It's like it not never ends. It's years of continuous problem solving, right? And keeping yourself in a positive framework under a negative environment, which most of the time it's it's like an ultra but longer.
So true. I think both of us, all the three of us, resonate with this very, very well. It's that's for sure. I mean, it's right that it's a busy market. It is, from the inside, it looks like a busy market, but from the outside, it might look just like an open field right now. And being first, it's not always the best thing either.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just the endurance that matters, and then who knows, in 2030, 6 years from now, how things will look like. I think you made this very big goal on Dragon's Den that by 2028 you want to reach 12 million pounds dollars in revenue. You also, the company, I think with Stephen Bartlett, the deal was 100K for 5% of the company plus 5% royalties on sales, right?
Mhm.
How has all that evolved, and how will that help you to reach the goal of 2028 of $12 million? Like,
Well, it's actually bigger now, to be honest. The predictions for 2028, because of the changes in the model since we recorded that show, and there's a part of it which comes from technology development, not only from the races themselves, which are things that we are working on kind of stealth mode, to I think larger products. Because to be very honest, I think that the events and the World Championship is a big driver of, if done well, positive economical impact for the regions where the events are hosted. So in a way, we can look at event as trail running races that last for 3, 4, 5 days as flagship events to promote a mountain range. But if you find a way to keep people coming all year round, I think that's where the true revenue and profit comes from. And the World Championship is a global stage. And so the tech developments that we are working on have to do with facilitating and making it more convenient and affordable for people to come and experience the trails in different places in the world all year round, whether it's local or international.
It makes sense. And I think, yeah, I mean, as we know, it's hard to make money from there. As you think about different locations to go to, obviously we're based in, well, I'm in Asia, Marcus is in California. I remember on the show you were doing Brazil, all these different places. And I don't know how many ultra runners there are in Brazil or UAE, but we know most are in Europe or America. Are you trying to get sold out races? So talking about this 12 million revenue, people pay a lot for races today. So, but maybe if you go to Brazil, can you sell 1,000 slots? So I'm interested. Obviously, I hear you say you can do some tech stuff as well, but just in terms of making revenue from races, is it your goal to have a few thousand people at every race, like some races do today?
I think that's not the best way to look at organizing trail running events, looking into registrations. I think organizers have tended to do is to go to the mountain where they know the mayor, or city council or something like that, and try, oh, this is so beautiful mountain, let's do something here. Whereas the world is There's lots of mountains around the world. And when you're not trying to build something local, but something global, you're not attached to those types of approaches or relationships, which means you can go into a country like Brazil, which can fit the whole Europe inside it. A huge number of states. No one is looking at it, but it's perhaps one of the places in the world where amateur sports, from trail running, running, triathlon, are growing more worldwide. What you actually might find is that there are government funding, government grants, there are different types of incentives to put up events, high quality events to drive tourism and economical impact for the regions, and in a way promote the country as a trail running, mountain biking, or an outdoor sports destination. Maybe Brazil is very interested to the world starting to look at it as that, or the UAE. You think about the UAE, you think city Dubai, but you have the Jebel Jais mountains and other options which are fantastic. And this happens in other places. But also, there's a combination of, like having the nice wine on the menu, having a race in the Himalayas, as we are going to have the first non-stop 100 miler next year, starting in Leh, in Ladakh. It's going to be you can't get much better experience than that. Above 3,000 meters the whole race.
I have spent some time in Nepal. I've been 4 or 5 times. I've walked up to Mustang. I've been through it. And if any of us have watched Lessons from the Edge, Ryan Hall's epic crossing of the Himalayas, I mean, yeah, you don't need 1,000 people up there. You just need a few hundred. You sell that incredible experience. So I hear you. I think there is different ways to be able to do that. Maybe just away from the business side, you've come back to running. You said you're running a lot now. Are you going to race your own races?
I've done that before. So I've run 200-mile races that we organized. I think I ran 4 or 5 races. I always say I'm not going to do it. At the end of it, I'm not going to do it again because I'm running and I'm worried about, has the post gone out, or have they already sent this, or are the medals there? I don't know, very small things. And the whole race, I'm worried about things that have nothing to do with the race, and I tend not to feel very well. The only races I had stomach issues and so on were the 100 milers I ran inside 100 because I was worried about other things. But that was when I was a CEO, and one of the things I decided recently, and it was, I can already attest on the first almost 4 months now, best decision we could have made is, for example, the CEO, which is also called Joao, which is a very funny one. He comes from a tourism hospitality background. And you may ask why. And it is exactly for the reasons I said before. People are looking at race registrations and technical sponsors. That's not where the growth, in my opinion, is. I think that's the basic strategy, getting race registrations and technical sponsors. But it's actually the large foreign exchanges or insurance companies and so on that understand the type of profile of runner inside the community. And when you have a very large championship, if you have the right marketing data, and if you put it into a digestible format that these large players can understand, and it has to be super well refined, I think there could be a lot more funding coming into the sport. I don't mind being a bit controversial. I know a lot of trail runners don't talk about commercial and money flowing. Try and put a large race together without funding. You cannot do it. You want a global platform? I think we should have races that are very intimate, like huge experiences, and all power to that to happen. But why not have a global professional stage as well for athletes that want to be professional, and some amateur athletes that want to have a great experience? And unlike football, you cannot share the football pitch with Ronaldo, but you can share a trail with your favorite runner or your idol if you have an idol. I think the way to look into this is much more on the tourism development impact. And to be honest, if you look into any of the other endurance sports, even in cities, that's where most of the funding or a lot of the funding comes from. But when you're talking about mountains, how many other ways do they have to promote their mountain range? And if they're more focused on winter sports, how do they fill up during the down season? And I think these are the ways to look at a global championship. But if you're a local organizer, that doesn't work for you. Only works in the model like for 100 or other international race organizers. And to be honest, I don't know if it's us that are going to make it at the end of all of it, but we are certainly doing our best and trying to drive attention from places that never looked at trail running before, which I think gives us an edge and perhaps a reduced risk that we are going to be the ones making it.
Yeah, wow. That's a very new take on the sport, on the show. I know it's been talked about before, but it's great to dive into it a bit deeper and hear it from you directly. Time will tell. I mean, let's see how the next few years will play out. We're coming up to the end of the show, so we're going to wrap it up here as well. But where can people find out more about you and, of course, the trail series, the 100 groups races? How to reach out and how to connect?
Well, if you go website 100trail.com, that's kind of the obvious place for to reach out and to find out more about 100. And for me personally, it's just joaoandrade.ventures on Instagram. I think is the best way to follow me and what I'm up to. And I'm doing quite a bit of running nowadays as well. So this combination of how you're managing 100 and that. And I have a couple of roles in other sports tech companies I'm trying to help grow internationally as well. So it's a new stage in my career as well.
Yeah, wow. It's an important year for you, it seems like. And personally, for sure. And then I'm sure that next year also 100 is going to be a very big year. Best of luck for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining on the show. Excited to dig deeper into the story behind Dragon's Den. I think it's always good to hear it from the horse of the mouth of the horse, this way around. I wish you really best of luck. I'm personally very happy to hear that you feel better and that you take all these lessons into the next stage.
Thanks. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me and the great questions.
Thank you. Ned earlier claimed he's not a very wise man, but maybe if you listen to our episodes before, the last 5 minutes belong to Mr. Ned, who is going to share some of his wisdom in his trail and ultra poetry, how we call it. So please bear with us for another Ned's drop that I will hand over to you now, Ned.
Thank you. I appreciate it. A little poem at the end. And just quickly before I do my poem, Joao, are you going to get Stephen to run 100 miles?
I think that's confidential for now.
Okay, no worries. That would be good if he does. All right, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is gonna surprise nobody, as Mark has very kindly pointed out. After 30 years of ultra, I finally won a race. As you guys know, I'm the biggest fan of Lazarus Lake. I think the races he puts on, he's clearly the opposite end, Joao. He is not commercial. He does it for other reasons. It's $1.60 to enter Barkley. Backyard is his own thing. So I was very grateful and lucky to win the Singapore Championships. I am now 1 year from pretty much today. I'm going to be in Lazarus Lake's backyard. It is called Big's Backyard. If anybody wants to know why, it's because he had 2 dogs, one called Big, one called Small. You can figure out why. And the backyard was his big dog's backyard. So I feel amazing that I'm going to be going there next year. So I wrote a little poem about backyard. This one's called Laz. Laz. Well, that was a thing. Actually, it still is a thing, as people are still running. The Belgians, the Americans, it's day 3. Or is it day 4? Who knows? I have been asked why about backyard a lot. And I said this the other day, without thinking. I think it encapsulates it. I have run for 30 years. I've seen trail, mountain, road, and the wilds. Now I want to explore my mind and body. That is what it is. Backyard, a singular exploration of yourself, of how your mind works, of where it goes, of why you are who you are. Lap 1, lap 10, lap 100. Now, I have not been 100, but for each of us, that last loop is loop 100, because that feeling, more than all, is what it's about. You have to find your limit. Now, I had a problem, according to lads, because this weekend, when I was the last person standing, I was the unlucky one. I was the last person standing, so I didn't find my limit. I didn't get to go there. Where was there? I don't know. Somewhere my mind wanted to go, but didn't go. I think it was far, but I didn't get close. And this is such a good but, because I was the unluckiest person on the day. But in 1 year, I get to be the luckiest. I go to Biggs, and I will get to see my limit. I will get to see the very end of my will, because I can't go 100 loops. So in the end, I will win, as I will reach the limit of my limit. Luckiest person ever. Thanks, Laz. See you in a year.
Thanks, Ned. All of us are extremely excited for your journey. So you talked about backyard for the last thousands of years. So now you have made it to be the last one in Singapore, and you are going to compete with the best next year in Tennessee, which is super exciting. I'm going to be there to kick your ass as well, as a supporter, not as a runner, of course. But
And one thing is, I told myself for the Singapore race that the entry price was 24 loops. So what Laz says, the game doesn't start for 100 miles. So the entry price at Biggs is 48. So they say everyone at Biggs is doing 48 minimum. So I'm like, Jesus, 200 miles is the minimum just to start the race. This is going to be fun.
We all have our own adventures here. So all on a journey. The journey is taking different paths. Thanks so much for having you right now, the two of you, on my journey as well. And I'm glad we crossed paths at this stage. So I wish you best of luck. And Joao, I'm sure we're gonna speak soon again. I have a feeling maybe we'll get you on the show back next year to see how it's going and to check in with how you are doing with the many of the series and the alliance races. For now, everyone else out there, thanks for listening, as usual, for checking in, for the feedback, for the ideas, and subscribe, reach out, follow us, whatever you feel like. Lots of trail love, lots of ultra love. I should mention 2 of them. And have a good life.
And lots of backyard love from me as well. Thanks, everybody. See you.